going to talk about the first lecture in the course Introduction to Engineering Design. In this lecture, we are going to talk about the civil engineering. We are going to know what does it mean by civil engineering. We are going to know what type of the projects that is going to be discussed in civil engineering. So, what is civil engineering? Civil engineering focuses on the infrastructure of the world. We heard that word a lot, infrastructure. So what does it mean? It means that the basic physical and organizational structure and facilities needed for the operation of a society. So any physical or basic physical or an organizational structure and facilities needed for the operation of the society, we are going to call this infrastructure. So we are going to see example for infrastructure that the civil engineering field is going to focus on it. We have the water works. So nowadays in our home and in our school and the hospital, we have a source for the water. And in order to do that, we need to develop a system so that the water is going to be pumped to all the houses and the industrial plants. So in order to do that, we need the work of civil engineering. Also, we have the sewers. Through the sewers, we're going to be able to get rid of the wastewater. And we have the dams. Through the dams, we are going to hold the water here so that we can release and hold the water whenever we want, so that we can organize the agricultural activities, and also through that we will be able to generate electricity. And also we have the power plants. So the whole industry depends on the power plants in order to manufacture different items. And we have the transmission towers. Through that, we are going to transmit the electricity from one place to another. And we have the rail roads. Through that, we'll be able to use the trains throughout the countries. And also we have the highways. Well, the highways is very important so that the cars and the trucks they will be able to move from one city to another. We have the bridges. In many cases, we are going to have waters or sea or rivers that prevent the people from moving from this part to that part. And through the bridges, we will be able to connect to places. And also we have the tunnels. The tunnels is very important. Sometimes we have like a mountain that prevent the movement of goods and people. So through the tunnel, we are going to create solution. And we have the irrigation canals. We are going to use that in order to regulate how to is going to regulate our agricultural activities. And also we have the river navigation. Through that, we are going to organize the movement of the ships. And we have the canals for the shipping, like a ship like that is very huge, so that we have a specific regulation in order to have something like that. Also, in civil engineering, we have the transportation part. Through that, we'll be able to control the traffic so that we are going to minimize the accidents and facilitate the movement of the cars. And also we have the airport runways, and we have the industrial plant building, and we have the skyscraper and so on. So the civil engineering focuses on the infrastructure of the world. So in the beginning, civil engineering included all engineers that did not practice military engineering. So if you are not going to practice military engineering, it means you are practicing civil engineering. So in the olden days, civil engineering include all the engineers, except those who practice military engineering. So you are either practicing military or you are practicing civil engineering. And we believe that the civil engineering began in 19th century in France. The first one who claimed to be civil engineer was John Simonton, who constructed the Eddystone Lightway. So he constructed this structure here, and he is the first one to call himself civil engineer. And the civil engineers, through their huge work, like you can see here, they have saved more lives than all the doctors in history. So the reason is simple, because of the development of clean water and sanitation system. So through the civil engineering, we managed to provide clean water and also to get rid of the wastewater in a safe way. Through that, we saved more life than all the doctors. So civil engineering is very important discipline. So most of the civil engineering projects is going to involve many processes, like the planning and the design and the construction and the operation and the maintenance and the rehabilitation. So we are going to go through every and each one of them in order to explain what does it mean. First, we have the planning. The planning means that I'm going to have an area that contains a problem, or area with a problem. That area is going to need improvement. For example, here we need to construct underpass so that we are going to facilitate the movement of the cars. So here we have an area that we have difficulties in the movement of the cars. So we need to create underpass in order to solve that problem. So we need to gather inputs from the public and from the Ministry of the Transportation in order to construct the underpass. So the first step is the planning. I need to find an area that need to be improved, and then I'm going to set the criteria for the design, and I'm going to gather information from the public, or the information needed to construct the project. Then we have the design process. The design process, that means I'm going to draw plans to show how the problem is going to be solved. So here, first I identified the area that needed to be improved. Then I need to come up with drawing to show us how the problem is going to be solved. That what does it mean by the design. Then we have the construction part. So now everything is on the papers. I need to implement those drawings, and that the process is called the construction. So the construction is going to be after the design, and is going to show us how to build the solution to the problem through the construction. Then the project is going to be finished, but we need to have operation or the maintenance, because through the life of the structure we are going to have small problems, and we need to fix that small problems, and we call this maintenance. So every year or 2 years we are going to fix the small problem that they may rise from the structure. And finally we have the rehabilitation. So sometimes the structure may be spent like 20 years or 30 years, and it's really the structure in very bad shape. So in that case, if I'm intended to fix the structure to be like similar to the original case or the original structure, we call this rehabilitation. So rehabilitation, it means that I'm going to make changes so that the structure is going to be similar to the original one. So it's very important to know the civil engineering process, the planning, the design, the construction, and the operation, and the maintenance, and the rehabilitation. Now I think most of you will be able to know, to tell the difference between those 5 processes. So now we are going to talk about civil engineering specialties. We have many specialties in civil engineering. We have the construction, we have the structures, we have the environmental or the water quality, we have the surveying, we have the transportation, we have the water resources, we have the geotechnical, we have the hydraulics, and we have the materials. So we have many specialties inside the civil engineering. So let's start with the first one, the construction engineers. So the construction engineers mean that I'm responsible to manage the construction resources. So if you have engineering projects, then you are going to have construction resources. You have the laborers, you have the materials, you have the equipment, you have the money, and you have the time. So we need to regulate all of these resources. You need to regulate the labor, you need to regulate the materials and the equipment with a certain budget or money in a certain time. That is the job of the construction engineer. Also, he should be able to design the formwork, the scaffolding, and the lifting apparatus, etc. Okay, so as construction engineer, you should be able to do that. Also, we have the materials engineers. So as material engineer, you should be able to design and analyze and construct materials. We have many materials in civil engineering. We have the steel, we have the concrete, we have the masonry, we have the asphalt, and we have the composites. So you should be able to analyze and construct and test those materials before using those materials. You should be able to design them, analyze them, and construct them. For example, if you are using concrete, you should test the concrete to make sure that it has the certain criteria required, like, for example, the compressive strength, the slump test, and so on. And also we have the structural engineers. So those are responsible to design and analyze all man-made objects whose primary function is load resistant. For example, this building here is responsible to resist the dead load and the live load. Similarly, this stadium here is responsible to resist the dead load and the live load, and also for that building, since it's a high-rise building, should also resist the wind load and sometimes the earthquake loads or the seismic load. So like the buildings and bridges, transmission towers, radar, domes, and etc. So those who have the ability to design and analyze all man-made objects, we are going to call them structural engineers. Also, we have the surveyors. So they are responsible for measuring distances, angles, and positions to precisely locate and lay out engineering projects. So you know that all the engineering projects, we need to locate a certain element at a certain position and a certain level. So in order to do that, we should be able to use those devices, those surveying devices, in order, like the total station, in order to measure the distances, angles, and the position. So you are going to find them in all the engineering, the civil engineering projects. That is going to involve the use also of GIS, GPS, and the laser distance measurement devices. Also, they are going to be responsible to produce topography maps. Through the topography maps, we will be able to know the elevation of the points in my project. Also, we have the transportation engineers. Those are responsible to analyze the movement of persons and goods. So those are responsible to make sure that the people is going to go from one place to another in a smooth way. Also, the goods is going to be located or relocated from one city to another. So the job of the transportation engineers, they are going to facilitate the movement of the person and the good. And that is going to involve plan, design, construct, maintain, and operate various transportation modes, like the highway, railway, air, and the water. And also they are going to design the traffic management system. So those who are going to do that, we are going to call them transportation engineers. Also, we have the environmental engineers. Those who are going to model and monitor the movement and behavior of the water pollutants in natural waters. We have many natural waters, and in order to have clean water, we need to model and monitor the movement of those water pollutants. In order to do that, we need to apply the fluid mechanics and the biology and the chemistry to design and operate of environmental control system, like the municipal and industrial wastewater system. Those who are going to do that, we are going to call them environmental engineers. And also we have the hydraulic engineers. So we have liquids like the water or the oil. We need to transport them from one place to another. So that, in order to do that, I'm going to use pipes, system of pipe, for example. So in order to move those liquids, I need to use pipes, and also I need to use hydraulic machinery such as pumps and turbines. So those who are going to do that, we are going to call them hydraulics engineers. So those are responsible for the movement of the liquids from one place to another. Also, we have the water resources engineers. We have many water resources. We have rivers, we have groundwaters. So now those sources are very important nowadays, and we need to develop and manage the water resources. For example, here we have a river like that. If you neglect this river, maybe you are going to lose that source of the water. And now all sources of the water is very important, and maybe we may see worse because of the source of waters. So in order to develop and use those water resources, those who are going to analyze that and develop them, we are going to call them water resources engineers. And finally, we have the geotechnical engineers. So in order to start any project, you need to deal with the soil in that project. And in order to analyze the soil and the rock that affect the behavior of the structure, pavement, and the underground facilities, and containment structure for the solid and the liquid waste, we are going to design foundation, retaining walls, railway cuts, and also we are going to conduct field and laboratory work along with the design. We are going to call this geotechnical engineers. Very important discipline, is going to be involved almost in every civil engineering project. So here we have engineers who are going to take samples from the soil. They need to have a sample so that they can test the quality of the soil. Upon that, we should be able to decide what to do with the project. Here we have a retaining wall in order to prevent the soil from moving here inside the project. Here we have a collapse because of the soil. So if you don't have, for example, retaining wall, the soil is going to collapse. So it's very important to provide retaining wall. So all civil engineering work begins with the geotechnical engineering, like I just said. So if you have an engineering project, you are going to deal with the soil. Those who are going to specialize in geotechnical engineering, they need to know the soil mechanics, and also they need to know the difference between the soil mechanics and the geotechnical engineering. In soil mechanics, we are going to apply the principle of strength of material in order to predict the mechanical behavior of the soil. So through that course, we are going to apply what we have learned in strength of material in order to predict the mechanical behavior of the soil. While the geotechnical engineering is a branch of civil engineering that deal with the soil, rock, and the underground water and the relation to the design, construction, and the operation of the engineering project. So soil mechanics only studies or applies the principle of the engineering mechanics to know the behavior of the mechanical behavior of the soil, while the geotechnical engineering is going to involve the soil mechanics with the design and design, construction, and the operation of the engineering projects. So geotechnical engineering is the broader term. So here we are going to look at the typical geotechnical projects. So here we have the construction site. So before we are going to start working on that construction site, we are going to take samples. Then we are going to take that sample in the lab for testing. After the testing, we should be able to know the soil properties. Upon that, we will be able to design and make the design and the analysis. Then we are going to implement the design details back to the construction site. Example for that, the compaction process. In order to make compaction in the construction site, I need to take a sample so that I need to know the optimum water content, and through that I'm going to be able to implement the compaction. And regarding the foundation, we have two types of foundation. We have the shallow foundations and we have the deep foundations. The shallow foundation, in that case, or generally the foundation, we are going to use them to transferring the building loads to underground. So here I have a building through the foundation. This one is the foundation here. We are going to use the foundation in order to transfer the load of the building to the ground. So mainly we are going to use shallow foundation for firm soil or lightweight loads. So if the soil is firm or is a strong soil and the load is light, in that case it's expected to use shallow foundation. So here we have shallow foundation. Example for that, we have the isolated footing and the combined footing and the raft foundation. On the other hand, we have the deep foundation. Also, we are going to use them to transfer the load from the building to the soil. Mostly, we are going to use them in case of weak soil and heavy load. So if I'm going to have weak soil and heavy load, it's expected to have deep foundation. Example for that, the use of the pile. Also, we have one of the most important structure in geotechnical engineering. We have the retaining walls. So the purpose of the retaining wall is to prevent the soil from spreading laterally. So here I have a soil around, and here I have underpass. So if I don't have those retaining walls, the soil is going to spread laterally. The soil is going to be there. So it's very important to put the retaining walls. Here I have retaining walls here. I have retaining walls there. So without those retaining walls, the pavement here or the highway here is going to collapse. Also, I have the sheet piles. The sheet piles is going to prevent also the soil from spreading around, or it's going to prevent the water from going there. So here I have engineering project here. I'm going to implement the sheet piles so that I can isolate the water from the project. And also I have the earth dam. We are going to use the dams for impounding water. We are going to hold the water here, and I'm going to release the water whenever I want. Sometimes I'm going to have leak through the water, so it's very important to study the soil. And also I have the earthwork. We are going to preparing the ground before the construction. We call this the earthwork. Also, in order to do that, I need to know the condition of the soil. I'm going to stop here. Like you can see here, we have many disciplines in our department. We have structure and materials. We have the transportation engineering. We have the geotechnical engineering. We have the water and the water resources, and we have the construction. So this course should help you in order to decide which discipline you should follow. So I'm going to stop here. So if you have any questions regarding the lecture, so